right, welcome back to another episode of the Psychopedia podcast. I'm your host, Investigator Slater. So pumped that you're here with me. If you weren't here last week and you're wondering where Tank is, we did make an announcement that Tank is going to be stepping back from the podcast just because he's the good news guy. His POV is all sunshine and rainbows and wisdom and sage advice, and that's why we love him. But after 2 years of just immersing himself in the dark true crime world, it's not for him, guys. He loves you. He loves me. We love him. But he's quite literally on to greener pastures, if you know what I mean, like all happiness. And this is my happy space. I could not be any happier doing true crime. And if I tell you the shit I have lined up for you guys, now that it's the real ones here, we are going to go to some very exciting places together, you guys. I know we always talk about exploring the dark corners of the human psyche. Yes, we are going to be doing that, but we are going to be doing that in so many more ways. So I hope that you will stick with me on this journey. If you're here, you already are, and I could not be any more grateful to have you here. Your support is so meaningful to me, all of your messages, your kind words. Thank you so much. With that said, if it's your first time here, welcome. And if it is your 127th time here, welcome home, freak. Thank you once again for spending your time with me. You could literally be anywhere in the world right now, and you are choosing to be here with me. And especially right now in this time of transition, it means so much. I really appreciate it. If you love listening and digging into some really dark shit and exploring all of these complex topics, share it with somebody else who's as weird as you are. Like, let's grow this family. Honestly, the best way to do that is organically. So if you love it and you chat about it and you get other people to listen and subscribe and follow, it's the best thing that you can do to help this podcast continue. So please don't hold back. Just like explode Psychopedia everywhere. And to that end, if you're not getting enough of what you want over here and you want more of the dark stuff, but also more of something else that's a little bit under wraps right now, but that I'm cooking up for Patreon, join us. Patreon.com/psychopediapod. First of all, you get ad-free episodes. So if you do not like listening to all the ads in the episodes, which I'm not a huge fan of that, so I imagine you're not, go over there. And for $5 a month, you can access all of these episodes without ads. There's other tiers also, so check out Patreon and see what you get for what. We do behind-the-scenes content, a full true crime episode a month, discounts on merch, chats, extra videos, pictures, stuff like that. So join us over there. And if not, that's fine too. I love you right here, right now for who you are, where you are. Before we get into the case, I just want to hit you guys with a handful of new Patreon names because I think it'll give you an idea of the type of incredible, creative, dark, and absurd and hilarious people that live over on Patreon. All right? They're your people. If you're listening to this, the people on Patreon are your people. Listen to these names. Okay. Chips Darkdale, obviously a nod to the Chippendale episode. Doused in Mountain Dew, which is referring to a case, a Slaterpedia case that lives on Patreon about somebody who doused herself in Mountain Dew to eliminate physical evidence, thinking that it would exonerate her from the crime. Spoiler, it didn't. Ivy Verona, what's up, Ivy? Great name. Mortuary School Dropout, which I think is a shout out to the little videos that I make on my Instagram page, which is Investigator Slater, by the way, Instagram and TikTok. I make these like little videos now. I think it might be in reference to that. Tastes Like Samsung. So fucking good. That's in reference to the Korean Cannibal Clan case. So creative. Another one in reference to that case. I can't believe it's not Butterfingers. There is, I'll give you a couple more. Elizabeth Bathory, straight up. I mean, doesn't get darker than that. And just Madeline. No last name, no name leading up to it, just Madeline. What's up, Maddie? So that, I think, covers our intro. I hope you guys like this week's case. And without any further ado, let's get into it. She was the kind of girl who seemed like she lived in exclamation points. A little offbeat, a little extra, but all heart. She could make "You're a virgin who can't drive" sound like both a dagger and a hug. She was a scene stealer, a chameleon, a walking contradiction, equal parts sweetness and shadow, with a voice that fluttered somewhere between breathy innocence and Bronx bodega. She didn't arrive in Hollywood like most. It wasn't a bang that she came in with or on a billboard. It was more like she floated in on a Lisa Frank sticker book and started coloring outside the lines of a Trapper Keeper. And these are hardcore 90s references. So if you don't know what it is, you're probably a fetus. Her roles weren't always polished, but man, were they magnetic. She didn't play characters. She invaded them, made them jittery, cracked, real. She's so adorably clueless, they used to say. But what they didn't see, what they didn't want to see, was that hid behind that wide grin and those big doe eyes was a nervous energy. The flitting of attention, the weight fluctuations, the strange entourage of hangers-on and sinister figures that always seemed to be just out of frame. By the end, it was as if she were shrinking right before our eyes. Skin translucent, hair kind of thinning out, voice barely above a whisper. Because beneath the giggles and Hollywood smile, her true story was festering, riddled with whispers of addiction, exploitation, illness, control, and something even darker, something that still doesn't sit quite right, even years later. This is the story of a starlet never built for the brutality of this industry. A 32-year-old woman who should have been owning her final act decades down the line, but instead became a riddle no one could solve. Her death ignited a wildfire of conspiracy theories. Some say she was poisoned by someone close to her. Others believe the government silenced her for ties to a whistleblower. And darker whispers drag her name into the murky web of shitty Diddy. We are going to explore all of that and so much more today, because this is the life and mysterious, tragic, and still hotly disputed death of Brittany Murphy. Brittany Ann Bertolotti was born at 12:16 a.m. on November 10th, 1977 in Atlanta, Georgia. Her mother, Sharon Murphy, was of Irish and Slovakian descent, and her father, Angelo, was of Italian ancestry. Angelo was an entrepreneur from New York with rumored ties to the mafia. The family relocated to Edison, New Jersey, partly to create distance from his alleged organized crime dealings, and partly so that Brittany could be closer to her two older half-brothers and one half-sister from Angelo's previous marriage. Now, Sharon and Angelo wound up divorcing when Brittany was just 2 years old, and according to Angelo, Sharon tried to prevent him from seeing Brittany. In fact, I've read a bunch of sources where Sharon actually denies that Angelo is even Brittany's father. However, Angelo apparently met with Brittany secretly, although the biggest male role model in her life was her Uncle Billy, Sharon's brother, who was a Vietnam vet. Brittany and her mom were so beyond close, they slept side by side on a narrow cot in a shoebox apartment rattled by passing trains, surviving on mostly spaghetti when Brittany was young. They didn't have much. They barely had enough for bills, but Sharon always found a way to afford dance classes 6 days a week, beginning when Brittany was just 3 years old. She said that Brittany was born with rhythm in her bones, kicking in sync to music in utero before she even took her first breath. Which, honestly, I have to just sideline for a second. I really think you can tell a future human being's personality in utero. So when I was pregnant with my second son, this was like when Game of Thrones was really hot, and I would watch it. And every single time Khal Drogo did something like maniacal, my son would kick the shit out of me. And Firefighter Dave and I would always say, like, this kid's going to be born like an absolute warrior. And if I tell you this kid is an absolute warrior, he is. So I do believe it when parents think they have like a feeling when the baby's still cooking. Anyway, from the start, performing wasn't just something that Brittany did. It really was who she was. In fact, when she was 5 years old, she apparently approached Burt Reynolds and George Segal at a restaurant and declared that she too would be a star someday. She loved to sing anything from Italian opera to blues and eventually even wrote songs for herself. By the time she was 9, Brittany was already helping her mother make cold sales calls, okay? So she would disguise her voice to sound like an adult. Her mother, Sharon, worked as a sales rep for a china, crystal, and cookware company in the tri-state area, and she leaned on Brittany's natural charisma and hustle. So Brittany was helping her mother to bring in money at a very, very young age. Can you imagine a young child making cold calls? I mean, she had hustle. In between these makeshift telemarketing gigs, Brittany was performing in community theater, chasing stage lights and applause until she and her mother made the 60-mile drive to New York City, where she signed with a talent manager and officially began her climb. She started appearing in commercials for Pizza Hut, Honey Bunches of Oats, and Skittles. At this point, Brittany began taking acting classes as well. But in later years, she denied having ever formally trained and insisted instead that the best education she ever got came from being on set and learning by doing, which I happen to agree with. In 1991, Brittany decided to move to LA to pursue a serious career in acting at just 14 years old. She signed with an agent named Chris Snyder and lived with a chaperone since she was underage and initially moved out to LA alone without Sharon. Now, Sharon wound up joining Brittany shortly after and remained a constant support to Brittany throughout her entire life and career. Arguably, and I say arguably because according to some, Sharon was so focused on Brittany as a brand that she was less focused on Brittany as a daughter. But arguably, she was always in Brittany's corner. Either way, together, Brittany and Sharon navigated the unpredictable waters of the entertainment industry, and Brittany wasted no time diving in. Because at this point in her budding career, she made her credited TV debut on the CBS comedy series Murphy Brown. Pop quiz. Which statement is true? A. Brittany's audition monologue for Murphy Brown was a dramatic reading of a Taco Bell menu. B. My cousin was the head writer on Murphy Brown. C. Brittany got the role after it was discovered that a producer's wife actually purchased cookware from Brittany years earlier during a cold call. All right, guys. A, B, or C? I'm going to give you 5 seconds. The answer is B, which is so random. But my cousin was the head writer on Murphy Brown. So I had to put this in here because I thought it was really cool that her first gig was on Murphy Brown. And I have this now weird connection to her. It's not even a connection. I'm making this into something way bigger than it is because I just feel like being dramatic. But it's pretty cool. Now, following Murphy Brown, Brittany landed a role in the TV comedy series Drexel's Class and appeared in all 18 episodes that aired between 1991 and 1992. I really, really hope that there are people who grew up in the 90s listening to this episode because if you grew up when I grew up, this is very reminiscent, nostalgic. She appeared in a whole bunch of other 90s series, sitcoms, and films, including Parker Lewis Can't Lose, which was one of my favorites, Family Prayers, Disney Channel's Kids Incorporated, Almost Home, The Torkelsons, and Blossom. Brittany also appeared in commercials for Beverly Hills 90210, Gap Denim, Twix Candy Bar, and had small roles on Frasier, Sister, basically TGIF, Boy Meets World, and Party of Five. She did voice work for King of the Hill for all 13 seasons and even sang in a pop band in 1993 called Blessed with Soul. So she was very successful. She really was very early on too. I believe Brittany also won awards for her voice work in King of the Hill. Now, at this stage, Brittany had reportedly been told that she would never make it in movies, that she wasn't pretty enough, thin enough, or talented enough for the silver screen. But of course, hindsight makes fools of critics because Miss Murphy took that insult, smiled sweetly, and steamrolled right over it. She probably tossed in a perfectly timed as if while doing it. Because in 1995, Brittany Murphy landed a breakout role in the cult classic romantic comedy that defined my generation, and that was, of course, Clueless.
Get off of me! Ugh, as if!
Brittany played Ty, a 15-year-old, not stick-thin teenage girl who just transferred to the ultra-glamorous, ultra-ritzy Beverly Hills High School, Bronson Alcott. Enter Cher, who was played by Alicia Silverstone, and Dion, played by Stacey Dash, the fabulously dressed, hyper-popular Queen Bees, who took Ty under their wing for a head-to-toe makeover. And let me tell you guys, I was obsessed with Ty. Her character, who arrived grunge with box-dyed red hair and long baggy jeans, was so relatable and so human. From singing alone to a Mentos commercial to standing awkwardly alone at a party before getting hit in the head with a shoe, she was awkward, lovable, and completely iconic. She was different from every other character, and in a way that made her really unforgettable. While Cher and Dion were polished and privileged, Ty was raw, weird, endearing, and wildly unpredictable. And she delivered what's widely considered not just the most unforgettable line in Clueless, but one of the most cutting, quotable burns in teen movie history. And that was, quote, "You're a virgin who can't drive." I tried to nail the delivery on that. I hope I did her justice. And then in response to that, anybody who knows Clueless, then Cher says,
Oh, that was way harsh, Ty.
it was raw, it was hilarious, and it was totally era-defining. What's especially fantastic about that quote is that at the time when Brittany delivered it, she later revealed that she drew on her own experiences for the salty remark, explaining to Interview magazine that she was the last person out of her friends in real life to have lost her virginity and had failed her driving test 5 times after getting to LA. So that line that she delivered was almost self-directed, which is probably why it was so visceral and so beautifully executed. Brittany didn't fit the mold, and that's exactly what made her so magnetic. But behind the scenes, Brittany Murphy struggled with her self-esteem, an uphill battle that only got harder after she overheard someone on the Clueless set cruelly refer to her as a quote-unquote chunky monkey. And that comment stuck, chipping away at the confidence that she worked so hard to project. And the late 90s, early 2000s marked a peak era of ruthless misogyny in the media, relentless paparazzi stalking, invasive tabloid coverage, and the rise of gossip blogs like Perez Hilton, where public humiliation was currency. That's the era that I grew up in. That's the kind of public shaming of women's so-called imperfections that still haunts us today. This past Mother's Day, which just for reference in terms of when I'm recording this was this past weekend, a few days ago, my twin sister and I sat on a swing outside and spent 30 straight minutes picking ourselves apart. It's hard to unlearn that type of self-directed hate and blame and shame for being imperfect. It's hard to let go. Meanwhile, Sharon, Brittany's mother, who was undergoing treatment for breast cancer during the filming of Clueless, constantly reminded Brittany that she was beautiful. But no matter how deeply she loved her mom or how hard she tried to believe the praise, it was difficult for the teenage actress to silence an industry that measured worth in waistlines, cheekbones, and cruel whispers behind the camera. No matter how much talent she had, and it was undeniable she was talented, Brittany was already learning that in Hollywood, being different wasn't always celebrated. It was disqualifying. She was constantly being scrutinized, and that scrutiny would follow her for the rest of her life. On that note, pop quiz. What percentage of women make up speaking roles in top-grossing films? A, 21%. B, 34%. C, 49%. 5 seconds, go. The answer is B, 34%. The industry rewards appearance, youth, and perfection. And a 2020 USC Annenberg study found that women made up just 34% of speaking roles in top-grossing films, and even fewer once they passed the age of 40. That kind of systemic erasure contributes directly to self-esteem issues. So 2 years later, after Clueless was finally aired, it premiered, Brittany met a British future screenwriter named Simon Monjack, who at the time was working as a photographer covering the event, the premiere. Simon, who was 8 years older than Brittany, later told the press that he'd fallen in love with the then 17-year-old actress when he shot the first editorial photo of her for Jane magazine. So he stayed in contact with the young actress and, as you'll soon hear, eventually married her, becoming deeply entwined in both the mystery of her tragic death as well as the eerie circumstances of his own that shortly followed. Not long after Clueless made her a household name and cemented her place in pop culture history, Brittany Murphy was involved in a devastating car accident, one that nearly killed her and quietly marked the start of a darker, more complex chapter. She walked away with a dislocated jaw, a shattered collarbone, and fractured ribs, but the real pain lingered long after the bruises faded. Chronic back pain and a relentless ache in her jaw became her new normal, and to cope, Brittany turned to hydrocodone, an opiate-based painkiller that would quietly thread itself into the fabric of her life, if only by rumor. Whereas once Brittany claimed to have been, quote unquote, hooked on being an actress, sadly, it's reported that Brittany soon became hooked on something far more dangerous. But more on that later. We have another PQ. Pop quiz. What role did Brittany Murphy audition for in or around the year 2000 but didn't get? A. Rock groupie Penny Lane in Almost Famous. B. Computer programmer, hacker, and escapee from The Matrix, Trinity. C. Undercover special agent / beauty queen Gracie Hart in Miss Congeniality. Take your time, guys. Do not get this wrong. I'm just kidding. You can get it wrong. I will love you all the same. The answer is A. Rock groupie Penny Lane in Almost Famous, which eventually was played by my personal queen, Kate Hudson. But if you know me, then you know that all three of those options, A, B, and C, are three of my favorite movies. So I had to make it into a PQ. So Brittany did not land that role, but Brittany did land a significant role in the haunting and emotionally charged movie Girl Interrupted, sharing the screen with heavy hitters like Angelina Jolie and Winona Ryder. While Angelina Jolie dominated headlines for her Oscar-winning performance, Brittany quietly stole every scene she was in, bringing depth, fragility, and raw intensity to her portrayal of Daisy Randone, a girl battling severe trauma and an eating disorder. It was a performance that was both heartbreaking and unforgettable, and for those paying close attention, a chilling foreshadowing of the darkness that Brittany would come to know all too well in her own life. And it was around this time when Brittany was really understanding the full extent of one of Hollywood's cruelest lessons, which is one that we touched upon already, and that is that talent isn't always enough. In a 2000 Interview magazine article, that's the name of the magazine, Interview, she revealed that she lost out on a role because, as she put it, quote, a very important person in Hollywood said I wasn't fuckable enough. He said I was huggable, but not fuckable, end quote. And that quote is searing, obviously not just for its vulgarity, but for what it reveals about the industry and how the industry sees and treats women. Brittany, already grappling with physical pain, now found herself navigating a system that reduced her to how desirable she looked to men. So, like many women in Hollywood before her, and likely many after, definitely many after, she changed. In this way, life mimicked art. Because like her character Ty in Clueless, Brittany underwent a dramatic transformation. She got rid of her beautiful dark brown curls in exchange for blonde, straight hair extensions. She dropped a dramatic amount of weight. She started showing up to events looking like a polished, pliable version of the Hollywood ideal. And when she did, shock and awe, the industry finally gave her the kind of attention that she'd always deserved, but not for her depth, not for her artistry. They noticed her now because she looked the part. Brittany started appearing on magazine covers and hot lists, and it became the beginning of a cruel trade-off, where the more she disappeared into a Hollywood ideal, the more visible she became. In 2022, after another breakout role in Eminem's movie 8 Mile, she didn't just become visible, she became Hollywood's newest it girl, catapulted into the spotlight with a performance that proved that she could hold her own alongside some of the biggest names in music. Keep in mind, right, that she'd done a ton of other movies. I can't cover them all, so I'm taking creative liberties here in terms of which ones to highlight. It's movies that I've seen that I've liked and ones that really put her on the map. But just so you know, if you're a big Brittany fan and you follow all of her filmography, I am aware that she did so many other movies. According to Brittany, 8 Mile changed the world's perception of her, changing her from anonymous to people now knowing her name first and last, and using her name first and last in like everyday conversations. She hosted the MTV Movie Awards and regularly appeared on late night shows where she more or less confirmed that she'd become romantically involved with Eminem off screen for a bit. But then in about 2002, after meeting Ashton Kutcher on the set of the film Just Married, they started dating, which they denied for a while, which was more than just a high-profile Hollywood fling. It was the beginning of a public relationship that would later take on a darker tone in hindsight. Because years later, after Brittany's shocking death, Ashton would become one of the earliest people notified, and his response, or lack thereof, would become a talking point in conspiracy circles. Here's how the conspiracy web begins to tighten. After Brittany's death, which obviously we are going to detail and which I am getting to like momentarily here, many different theories began swirling, not just about her final moments, but about the forces that may have been circling her in the years leading up to her death. And two names, time and time again, keep coming up. And those two names are Ashton Kutcher and Sean Diddy Combs. But put this on ice, because we need to discuss exactly how Brittany died first so we can parse through the theories that posit her death and see how, contrary to official reports, it really appears like it was anything but accidental. So I'm going to sum up the next couple of years leading up to Brittany's death so we can finally get to the crux of the case. Now, following her breakup with Ashton Kutcher and prior to her marriage to Simon Monjack, Brittany got engaged twice, once to a talent manager and then to an actor. After filming a role in Tokyo, Brittany returned to LA where she met Simon, officially for the first time as an adult, because remember, they crossed paths years earlier when she was just 17. Brittany had a meeting with Simon, who by that point had become a writer and a director. And apparently from that meeting on, they'd become absolutely inseparable. Simon had grown up outside of London with his parents, his dad, William, and his mother, who was a hypnotherapist named Linda, and attended prestigious private schools throughout his life. Simon's IQ was apparently extremely high, and he was always a very charismatic individual. According to Simon's brother, James, quote, "From early childhood, Simon had the ability to manipulate the environment to get whatever he wanted," end quote. His personality completely changed, according to his mother, Linda, following the death of his father. Linda told The Hollywood Reporter that his death completely destroyed Simon and it changed his personality. At times, Simon was unable to separate fact from fiction. Before meeting Brittany, Simon had a troubling relationship history marked by deceit and manipulation. If you follow the headlines, if you know a bit about Brittany Murphy and her life and her relationship and therefore know about Simon Monjack, you know that he is considered very largely a shady motherfucker. His mother described him as someone who just fell in and out of love. I'm not even sure what that means. But former partners of Simon paint a far darker picture. He often lied to women, claiming that he was extremely wealthy, owned 17 Ferraris, dated Elle Macpherson and Madonna, and he even faked having a spinal cancer diagnosis to pressure his then-fiancée, a woman named Elizabeth Ragsdale, into getting pregnant, only to abandon her upon arrival in the U.S. Elizabeth later learned from his mother, Linda, that the cancer was fabricated. Simon never had cancer. He later married British TV host Simone Bien in 2001, but after their divorce in 2006, which included a lawsuit over unpaid divorce costs, Simon then reconnected with Brittany. So that's just a little bit of a history on Simon. Now, Brittany and Simon got married by a rabbi in 2007 at their multi-story, 8,000 square foot Hollywood Hills home. Pop quiz. Who owned that home before Brittany Murphy purchased it? A. Nicolas Cage, B. Heath Ledger, C. Britney Spears. The answer is Britney Spears. Wild, right? Brittany Murphy purchased it fully furnished from Britney Spears in 2003 for $3.85 million, which I feel like, it doesn't seem like a lot in the world of Hollywood. I think the reason why the cost wasn't like astronomical like I would have expected it to be, well, we're going to get into it, but there were some whispers and some rumors about the property being haunted. But hold on to that for a minute, because that's part of one of the conspiracy theories that I'm going to put forward in a second. So Brittany and Simon are married, and they've now moved into this house. Those closest to Brittany Murphy reportedly believed that she was moving way too fast with Simon. Everyone thought that, except her mother, Sharon, who seemed to support the whirlwind pace of their relationship. In fact, some friends were so alarmed by Brittany's relationship with Simon that they staged a kind of intervention and presented Brittany with evidence of Simon's criminal past in a desperate attempt to stop the wedding. But in 2007, she went ahead with the marriage and began building a future with her new husband. The couple even made plans to start a family and leave Los Angeles behind for a fresh start in New York. But that future never came, because on December 20th, 2009, Brittany Murphy died in that home. She was just 32 years old. Here are the devastating details. First of all, in the time leading up to her death, Brittany was very weak, very thin, and unable to stand on her own 2 feet, according to some sources. The night before Brittany died, she was at home in the Hollywood Hills with both Simon and Sharon. The trio, who all lived together in that home, had just returned from Puerto Rico, where Brittany had abruptly exited filming a movie called The Caller, a departure that Simon insisted was mutual. But rumors told a different story, that Brittany had been fired for being difficult on set, chronically late, and making very bizarre demands like requesting peanut butter and jelly sandwiches cut diagonally every hour, only to leave the sandwiches untouched. Another rumor, which I think has been proven accurate, so it's less of a rumor and more fact, is that Simon would arrive drunk on set, and when Brittany was asked to remove her drunk husband from the set, she would refuse. But regardless, whatever her reason was, while in Puerto Rico, Brittany, Simon, and Sharon all fell ill, and Brittany's condition worsened over the following weeks upon their return, and they returned because Brittany got fired. Brittany developed laryngitis and other related symptoms, but avoided going to a doctor as she allegedly feared paparazzi exposure at that time. And she was afraid it would damage her career, right? Because she was just asked to leave a film. So she was trying to lay low and stay out of the limelight as much as she could. So instead, she consulted with the pharmacist and spoke with the doctor over the phone to treat symptoms including headaches, muscle cramping, vertigo, vomiting, and abdominal pain. But then, on the early morning of December 20th, 2009, Brittany began gasping for air, and according to Simon, she apparently told her mother, quote, "I'm dying. Mommy, I love you." Sharon ended up telling The Hollywood Reporter that Brittany's last words were, "Mommy, I can't catch my breath. Help me." Sharon placed the 911 call at 8 a.m., and in the background, you can hear Simon attempting to perform CPR on Brittany while the dispatcher gives step-by-step instructions. And to be honest, to me, because I heard the tape, it's clear that Simon was not exactly following what the dispatcher was telling him to do. You keep hearing the dispatcher saying to Simon, "You have to go faster with the compressions. You have to go faster." And you can hear him counting and putting his oomph into it. And he's just not hitting the pace. That's just an observation at this stage. I'm not making a judgment call yet. It's just something I noticed. So while Brittany's final words may never be known for certain, although they're pretty similar, whether you go with Simon's version or Sharon's version, what is known is where she spent her last moments. Collapsed on the floor of her peach-colored bathroom at the southern end of the house, surrounded by a chaotic nest of clothing, overturned perfume bottles, scattered makeup, sweat-soaked sheets, an oxygen machine, medical equipment, and piles of over-the-counter medication. So Sharon placed the 911 call at 8 a.m., like I said, but heartbreakingly, in spite of Simon doing CPR, how good he was doing it remains up for interpretation, but it was heartbreakingly too late for Brittany. By the time the medics arrived, her lips had turned blue, her brown eyes were glazed over and mildly bloodshot, and her skin had grown pale. And at 10:04 a.m., with rigor mortis already beginning to set in, Brittany Murphy Monjack was declared dead at the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. An autopsy and full-body examination was conducted at 2:45 p.m. on the same day at the Forensic Science Center. Present at the autopsy were Detectives C. Gable and S. Brandstetter from the LAPD, Dr. Lisa Shinen, a deputy medical examiner. She was the main coroner. Ed Winter, the assistant chief coroner, whose name may sound familiar to you because he's the public-facing coroner, the one who interfaces with the media, and he's been on a lot of other high-profile autopsies, including Michael Jackson, Kim Porter, who we're going to get to, and a few other celebrities. Also present, and I put this in here to just fuck with myself, the chief medical examiner, Dr. Lakshmana Satyavagiswaranthi. You know what? I nailed it. Hell yeah. The now retired LA County coroner, Dr. Lisa Shinen, who conducted Brittany's autopsy, ruled that she died as a result of pneumonia combined with anemia and the contributing factor of quote-unquote multiple drug intoxication from prescription and over-the-counter medication. Her original report specifically described Brittany's illness as acute pneumonia consistent with a community-acquired infection and noted she was suffering from hypochromic microcytic anemia, most often caused by iron deficiency. The report explained that chronic anemia severely weakens the body and increases susceptibility to infection. In Brittany's case, her anemia was partly attributed to a history of heavy menstrual bleeding. In fact, at the time of her death, Brittany was indeed menstruating. According to Assistant Chief Coroner Ed Winter, again, who assisted in the autopsy, oversaw the case, and served as the public spokesperson, the condition was so severe that it could have been fatal on its own. The coroner believed her death was likely preventable and stated, quote, "All Brittany needed was to have gone to a doctor who would have probably sent her immediately for blood transfusions. Her hematocrit was so low at death, it was practically incompatible with life. I'm surprised she lasted that long," end quote. Additionally, contrary to theories or rumors suggesting that Brittany died from complications relating to an eating disorder, and this is, the predominant headlining theory, that she was battling anorexia and that she essentially died as a result, this was really not proven to be the case. The autopsy revealed that she was about 5'4" and 115 pounds at the time of death. She was said to be slim, but, and this is a quote, "well-developed and muscular. Her stomach was not distended, and it contained about 50 cc's of slightly digested food, as well as Gatorade, water, and tea with lemon." So really, the theory that she died from an eating disorder does not seem to hold water when you look at the autopsy. However, multiple medications were present in elevated amounts, including hydrocodone and a bunch of antihistamines that I just tried to say 3 times and finally said, fuck it, I'm just going to say antihistamines. But these were commonly found in over-the-counter inhalers. We knew that she was struggling to breathe the night before her death and that she had, for sure, pneumonia. While none of the medications were considered toxic on their own, the report emphasized that the elevated levels of these medications cannot be discounted, especially in her weakened state. Additionally, Brittany was apparently diabetic, which I had no idea about, and had a history of hypoglycemia. All that said, ultimately and conclusively, Brittany Murphy's death, which was essentially cardiac arrest, was ruled accidental. That said, while the coroner did not rule Brittany Murphy's death as suspicious, there were rumors that Brittany's untimely death was indeed no accident. To that foreboding end, let's explore the predominant theories. Theory number 1, Brittany Murphy was killed by her husband, Simon Monjack. Simon was known to be secretive, manipulative, and allegedly financially and emotionally controlling. Many who knew Brittany were concerned by her rapid transformation after getting involved with him. He had reportedly gone so far as to cut Brittany off from her cell phone and email prior to her death, and even fired her entire team, including her manager, lawyer, and agent. And he assumed those roles instead. He also apparently fired her makeup artist and assumed that position as well. So we're seeing if this is indeed correct, and it is, according to my sources, a very controlling partner. After Brittany's death, suspicions deepened when Simon Monjack, aka Konjac, decided to immediately launch the Brittany Murphy Foundation, where he circulated donation suggestions up to $10,000 a pop. He also initially opposed an autopsy, vehemently, went on Larry King Live and vehemently opposed the need for Brittany Murphy to have an autopsy, which raised further eyebrows, even though he claimed it was a result of his Jewish faith. Because in traditional Judaism, autopsies are generally avoided out of respect for the dead, as the body is considered sacred and needs to remain whole when it's buried. They're only permitted, however, when legally required or if the findings could potentially help save another life. In Brittany's case, obviously, the coroner proceeded with the autopsy, and the findings really only deepened suspicions around Simon because the final report suggested that Brittany's death could have been prevented with timely medical care. Now, Simon insisted that she'd been under a doctor's care and that he believed she only had the flu. He told People magazine in 2010, quote, "I had no idea she had pneumonia. I took very good care of my wife. She was on antibiotics and she was taking cough medicine and doing all the right things," end quote. And since the coroner officially declared Brittany's shocking death an accident, a criminal investigation was not pursued. Now, all of that said, there's a major monkey wrench that throws this whole Simon did it theory into question. And if you're wondering where this theory kind of puts Simon in the seat of perpetrator, it's because, number one, Apparently, her death could have been avoided if she had medical intervention. Why didn't she have medical intervention? 2, she was fading publicly, right? She was losing a lot of weight. She was visibly becoming, kind of gaunt looking, sort of disappearing. Was she very, very ill even before the pneumonia hit? Because they all came down with it in Puerto Rico. And if that's the case, was something happening slowly behind the scenes, orchestrated by Simon? And of course, number 3, for me, when she was pronounced or when she was discovered to have been dead, did they act fast enough getting 911 to the house? And then, the last thing, obviously, is he avoided an autopsy as much as he could. So these are sort of all big red flags, if you want to look at it that way. And not everybody does, but also so many people do. But you question whether or not Simon was involved in her death because just 5 months after Brittany's death, Simon also died in the exact same house of the exact same cause, pneumonia. Which brings us to theories 2/3. Some speculate that toxic black mold in Brittany and Simon's Hollywood Hills home may have played a role in both of their deaths. The house was reportedly water damaged, and mold exposure can cause very serious respiratory issues, symptoms that could mirror the pneumonia that ultimately killed them both. In fact, at the time of Brittany's death, her home was reported to have smelled like perspiration, espresso, cigars, and, crucially, damp, rotting wood. Additionally, Brittany's autopsy revealed that parts of her lungs in the lower lobes, as well as the upper right lobe, appeared very dense and that there were multiple granulomas or areas of inflammation in that tissue. Apparently, the most common cause of lung granulomas is fungal infection, and the most common fungal infection in the U.S. is caused by histoplasma, which is a type of mold that is pathogenic and can lead to health issues or even death. This is all explained, by the way, in the book titled A Case for Murder, Brittany Murphy Files by Bryn Kurt James Hammond. Now, this is where I get confused, okay? The coroner publicly dismissed mold as being a contributing factor and indicated that no toxic mold was officially confirmed during the investigation. However, Simon's mother, Linda Monjack, continued to fuel this theory when she told public sources in 2013 that her son had allegedly found severe mold in the home prior to his death. Linda stated, quote, "All I know is that before Simon's death, he was having hallucinations that things were crawling out of his skin." To that end, and I alluded to this earlier, Britney Spears, who was dating Justin Timberlake when she lived in that same house, that Justin Timberlake part was completely useless information and irrelevant, but I just had to throw it in there so that you can figure out in your mind where Britney Spears was in her life at this stage, okay? Britney Spears claimed that when she lived in that house, she had an otherworldly encounter that led her to leave the property and never return. And in my mind, perhaps that's why the value was so low. She sold it for what I think seems like a very low amount, especially because they ended up rebuilding the house eventually and selling it for $14 million or something like that. It's a valuable property. Britney Spears apparently had a friend do Reiki healing on her following this otherworldly encounter. So she was pretty spooked, and she was pretty convinced that there was something happening inside that house. Additionally, Brittany Murphy's mother, Sharon, who again lived in the house with Brittany and Simon, believes that mold was the factor in both of their deaths and has actually filed a lawsuit against her daughter's former attorneys, claiming that they misled her into waiving her right to suing the builders for negligence that allegedly allowed the mold to take hold. So she's been running with this theory that it's mold for quite some time. But maybe, just maybe, Sharon wanted it to be mold, because if it wasn't the house that killed her daughter and son-in-law, then it might have been her, which brings us to theory number 4. And that theory is that Brittany was poisoned by someone close to her, namely her mother, Sharon Murphy. This theory intensified after a private toxicology report commissioned by Brittany's estranged father, Angelo, allegedly found abnormally high levels of heavy metals, including antimony and barium, in Brittany's hair, enough for the lab to suggest that Brittany may have been poisoned, quote-unquote, by a third-party perpetrator with likely criminal intent. because apparently these metals are sometimes associated with rat poison or other chemical agents. The now deceased Angelo Bertolotti, Brittany's birth dad, arguably because Sharon still maintains that Angelo was not her biological father, wasted no time fanning the flames on this theory. In an interview with Good Morning America, he declared, quote, "I have a feeling that there was a definite murder situation here." In response, Sharon Murphy was quick to push back. In a public letter published in The Hollywood Reporter, she accused Angelo of exploiting Brittany's death for attention and pointed out that he'd been absent for so much of her life. And now this guy comes back and he's trying to claim that she was murdered. To what end? He's trying to get something out of it. This is Sharon's take. Now, forensic experts also stepped in and they also discredited the claims that she was being poisoned. Dr. Bruce Goldberger, president of the American Board of Forensic Toxicology, told CNN that a hair test alone, especially without any medical symptoms, was not reliable evidence of poisoning. He said, quote, "She was a beautiful woman and likely had numerous hair treatments. Chemicals in those products would have altered the chemistry of her hair sample." And the coroner's office also dismissed the reports that she was being poisoned. But I don't know. That said, some people are just not as convinced of Sharon's innocence, especially since Simon died just 5 months after Brittany in the same way, and since her personal items, Sharon's personal items, were allegedly discovered next to Simon's bed, hinting at the possibility that they'd been sexually involved. Following Brittany's death, Simon and Sharon had a really weird, in my opinion, photo shoot done, presumably for the press. But in this photo shoot, they're like holding hands, they're leaning into each other. It's icky. It's icky to me. I don't know how else to put it. I don't mean to pass judgment because if they were not romantically involved and they were really just two individuals mourning a very significant loss, I feel bad passing judgment. I'm just giving you my opinion based now on my research and just the feeling I get, guys. It's a feeling. You don't have to agree with me. It's okay. But this photo shoot is sus. Putting that aside, putting aside the fact that Sharon was apparently sleeping in bed with Simon, her shit was found in his nightstand, they had this really creepy photo shoot. On the night of Simon's death, which was May 23rd, 2010, Sharon reported being woken up at 7:30 p.m. to the sound of Simon gargling. When she went to check on him, he had a brown foam-like liquid oozing out the side of his mouth. She indicated that she wasn't particularly alarmed. I don't know why the fuck not, wiped his mouth and waited 45 minutes before calling for medical attention. But Simon's mom, Linda, has a different recollection of the events of that night. She claimed that Simon called her hours before his death, slurring his words and slipping in and out of consciousness. Linda claims that she begged Sharon to call 911. Remember, Linda lives in London, but that Sharon blatantly ignored her urgent requests. Moreover, Linda claims that she has a recording of Simon telling Sharon that he needed to go to the hospital, and Sharon responding by simply telling Simon to call his doctor and to report that he had a fever of 104. But let's set Linda's accusation aside for a second and let's just look at Sharon's own actions. If your daughter died less than 6 months ago from those exact fucking symptoms, why in the name of all that is medically obvious would you wait even a second to get help when your son-in-law starts going down the exact same road? And after connecting with emergency services, Sharon waited 6 minutes and 44 seconds before finally following the dispatcher's instructions to administer CPR. And the last thing I'm going to say about this theory, that Sharon may have been involved in the deaths of Simon and possibly Brittany, possibly both, is this. When an investigator named Kelly Blanchard arrived on the scene after Simon's death, she immediately clocked a suspicious detail. There was a cluster of prescription bottles next to Simon's bed, but none of them were in his name. They were all labeled for a Trevor Williams. Meanwhile, the rest of the drawer's contents clearly belonged to Sharon. When asked, Sharon initially claimed that the medications in the name of Trevor Williams belonged to her. Then later, she backtracked and denied that she'd ever said that, because obviously now people are looking for an explanation. Did he OD? What were all these prescription drugs doing there? Who's Trevor Williams? So she kind of like let it leak out, maybe in a moment of weakness, wasn't thinking, whatever, that she got those prescriptions under that name, realized now that that puts her in a very bad position and is trying to put the genie back in the bottle. The coroner's office stood by their report and confirmed that Sharon absolutely made that statement that the drugs were hers when it mattered most, and that was at the scene. Simon was also reportedly gaining a lot of weight and bloat prior to his death, was hallucinating, slurring his words, and presenting as confused and disoriented. These are symptoms that can be found in a victim being slowly poisoned by arsenic on a daily basis. Symptoms, mind you, that Brittany also exhibited and which may have contributed to why she was allegedly fired from the set of the movie that she was filming in Puerto Rico right before she got sick. Now, Simon's toxicology report, which I've read, showed a bunch of prescription drugs, right? But all were deemed to have been administered at a therapeutic or subtherapeutic, meaning lower than prescribed level. But combine that with the possibility that he'd been slowly poisoned or was slowly being administered a different, more undetectable drug or chemical, and it's a little suspicious. But why, right? Like, why would Sharon want Simon and possibly Brittany dead? According to this theory, the motive boils down to one thing, and probably all of you know what that one thing is: money. Some speculate that Sharon, having lived off Brittany's earnings for years, feared being cut off, especially as Brittany's health declined and her career stalled. And she was married to Simon, who had become very financially controlling. Sharon may have seen both of them as obstacles standing between her and what she believed she was owed. Now, this is a very dark theory. Like, I get that. I don't love it. I do not love pointing the finger at a woman who lost her child and her son-in-law. But in the name of, I don't know, journalism and just doing justice to all the theories out, not doing justice, that's the wrong way to put it, but like acknowledging all of the different theories out there, I wanted to at least present it. I'm not saying I believe it. It's out there, so now you have it out there too, in your ear holes. Okay, theory number 5. This is the second to last theory, by the way. I'm going to run you guys through 6. Theory number 5, the government took Brittany out due to a whistleblower connection. This theory stems from Brittany's reported friendship with Department of Homeland Security whistleblower Julia Davis. So Julia Davis is a former U.S. Department of Homeland Security employee who became a national security whistleblower in 2004 when she reported that DHS, or the Department of Homeland Security, had failed to properly process individuals entering the U.S. from terrorist-sponsoring countries, a claim that led to intense government scrutiny and allegedly retaliation. Because according to Julia Davis, as I said, the government was letting in individuals without documenting them from terrorist-sponsoring countries, okay? So now Julia Davis is claiming that Brittany Murphy and Simon Monjack were targeted and harassed because the government knew of their association with Julia Davis and because Brittany Murphy was apparently going to provide a deposition and or a full-blown testimony to support Julia's claim against the government. You guys following? So Julia has alleged that because of this connection, both Brittany and Simon became surveillance targets of federal agencies, including the DHS and the FBI. Julia has claimed that Brittany and Simon were literally harassed and intimidated as part of a campaign to silence anyone associated with her whistleblowing. And she believes that this campaign may have contributed to their untimely deaths. Now, it's important to note that these claims are not substantiated by official investigations. There's been no evidence presented by law enforcement to suggest that Brittany or Simon were targeted or that foul play perpetrated by the U.S. government occurred. However, these allegations have become a prominent part of conspiracy theories surrounding Brittany Murphy's death. There's actually a documentary about Julia's story. It's titled Top Priority: The Terror Within. So I don't know, maybe you want to check it out if you're interested in this one. Okay, guys, our last theory in terms of Brittany Murphy's very untimely, strange, and tragic death. Guess who it involves? Well, I've already given it away. Sean Shitty Diddy Combs. Because, like, who isn't somehow connected to that motherfucker now? This theory hinges not on one smoking gun, but on a constellation of eerie parallels, curious overlaps, and a series of unsettling coincidences that feel just a little too neat to ignore. And at the center of it all, believe it or not, is Mr. Ed Winter, the former LA County Deputy Coroner, who I mentioned assisted on Brittany's autopsy as well as other high-profile autopsies, and who was the public-facing spokesperson for these individuals, right, who died. Now, Ed Winter wasn't just any coroner. As I said, he was the go-to official for high-profile Hollywood deaths. But what makes conspiracy theorists raise their eyebrows is the fact that he was involved in not one, but two celebrity autopsies that ended in nearly identical conclusions. And that was lobar pneumonia, with a manner of death ruled as natural or accidental, right? The first being, obviously, Brittany Murphy, but the second being Kim Porter, who was the longtime partner of Diddy and the mother of three of his children. Now, we did a 3-parter on Shitty Diddy, and we named it aptly Shitty Diddy, and we really, really go deep into, everything relating to Diddy, but we definitely go very far into how Kim Porter was very likely, potentially, allegedly taken out by Diddy. And so it's like, here it comes again, right? It's like circling back. Because Kim Porter, like Brittany, died young. Like Brittany, she was reportedly ill with flu-like symptoms leading up to her death. And like Brittany, her cause of death was pneumonia. So now you have 2 profile women, there's more, Brittany Murphy and Kim Porter, both allegedly tied to powerful men, both dying young under suspiciously similar circumstances. And the one man who may have been in a position to re-examine the truth for Kim Porter was Ed Winter. And he was not afraid to question high-stakes cases. He famously flagged Michael Jackson's death after spotting an unusual number of injection sites. Ed died unexpectedly of natural causes as well at age 73 before he could complete a second autopsy on Kim Porter. To some, that's just a tragic coincidence, but to others, it reeks of something far more calculated. When the FBI launched an official investigation into Diddy, conspiracy theorists went into overdrive surrounding the circumstances of Kim's death and its potential connection to Brittany Murphy. Rumors began to swirl that Brittany, like Kim, knew too much about something bigger, darker, human sex trafficking that was possibly tied not only to Diddy, but to other Hollywood power players, including, but certainly unfortunately not limited to, Ashton Kutcher. Ashton wasn't just Brittany's co-star and ex-boyfriend. He was also very, very friendly with Diddy. They were often spotted together at his infamous white parties and also red carpet events. To some, he's the connective tissue, another link in a chain that seems at best coincidental and at worst calculated. And remember, Ashton was one of the earliest people notified of Brittany's death, and his response became another talking point in conspiracy circles because he didn't make a public statement or give a warm tribute. I don't agree with this, but he simply tweeted, quote, "Today the world lost a little piece of sunshine. My deepest condolences go out to Brittany's family, her husband, and her amazing mother, Sharon. See you on the other side, kid." End quote. He got so much shit for that tweet. Now listen, he definitely has some shady connection going on to Diddy, I think. My opinion, no proof. I think he made a very, very off-color, inappropriate, disgusting comment about Hillary Duff when she was underage. I think the guy's creepy. But I think to judge him on a tweet is ludicrous. I think to judge anybody on how they react to a loss is ludicrous. This is why in investigations, right, when detectives are investigating suspects or they drop a bomb that in an interview that somebody that a potential suspect or perpetrator knew is now dead and they're watching for the reaction. You can't do that. You can't get accurate information looking at somebody's reaction. Everybody reacts differently to shocking news and to death. I am not defending Ashton Kutcher. That is like more of a blanket statement. Anyway, circling back to Diddy, tack on an alleged mutual connection between Simon Monjack and Diddy via a personal trainer, and then Simon's death 5 months later in the exact same way as Brittany, in the exact same way as Kim Porter, with the coroner now dead, who could have, maybe would have circled back on a second autopsy for Kim Porter. And what you've got isn't exactly a neat theory, it's a web. And it's one that's woven with power, silence, and perhaps, at least according to many, too many coincidences to ignore. So those are the major theories making the rounds, at least based on everything that I've uncovered in my research. Now, before we move on, and to break it up for you little freaks, I'm going to give you a pop quiz. Which statement is true? A, Sharon Murphy auditioned to be on The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills right after Brittany's death. B, Ashton Kutcher allegedly warned Brittany to, quote, get away from Simon years before her death. C, 1 month before Brittany Murphy's death, celebrity blogger Perez Hilton predicted her death. All right, think. You got 5 seconds. Go. The answer is C. In early December 2009, during an appearance on the San Diego radio show AJ in the Morning, Perez Hilton was asked if he thought another celebrity might pass away soon, similar to Michael Jackson. And he responded, quote, Brittany Murphy, maybe. Just a weird, really weird fucking thing. And then she did. Very strange. Sadly, though, he was making a snap judgment based on her appearance in the paparazzi in the time leading up to her death because she was not looking well. Brittany Murphy was laid to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the Hollywood Hills during a quiet twilight ceremony attended by only her closest friends and family. As the lights of Burbank flickered in the distance and 30 mourners softly sang Amazing Grace, the air was thick with grief, disbelief, and the weight of what should have been. She was buried on Christmas Eve, a tragically poetic detail given her lifelong love of the holiday. Brittany had once dreamed of starring in a Christmas movie that she could then one day watch with her children, wrapped in blankets and joy. Instead, the girl who lit up every room was lowered into the earth while the rest of the world prepared to celebrate. And just like that, her light, so bright, so chaotic, so completely her own, was gone. Not dimmed, not faded, gone. We'll probably never know the full truth about what happened to Brittany Murphy. Not just what's in the toxicology reports or the coroner summary, but the layers underneath. The dynamics in that house, the financial control, the emotional control, the isolation, the way Simon Monjack inserted himself into every corner of her life and slowly, quietly cut her off from the outside world. There were warning signs that something wasn't right, plenty of them. Friends tried to intervene, her career was stalling, her health was clearly declining, and yet no one was able to truly break through. Why? Was it denial, fear, or did people just not want to get involved? And then there's the bigger picture, how the media treated her, how the industry discarded her, how quickly her death was labeled natural and moved on, or labeled an eating disorder, done. But the circumstances were anything but clear. So no, we may never get all the answers, but the questions, they matter, and they deserve to be asked out loud. And that is the case. And I'd love to know what you guys think. If you believe the full story about Brittany's death, like if you believe, was it ever really fully told? Do you think there's more beneath the surface? Is there something that everybody has missed? Something that, people didn't want us to see perhaps? Let me know what you think. I'm curious. I think that there was something going on. I really do. I don't think that a woman who, was so crushing it, right? Like she really was, to just fade. She was 32 years old. Keep that in mind, like very, very young. Even if she was battling an eating disorder, which that remains unclear because like I said, at her autopsy, she did not appear to show signs of an eating disorder. But even if she was, to be fading in a way that made her confused, look, I'm not a doctor. I do think something shady was going on. I would have thought it was having to do with Simon, given his past relationships, how people describe him who really know him, including his own brother. But then he died in the same manner 5 months later. I think there might be something to that mold theory. I have to, there's something. I don't know what, but I don't believe that both Brittany Murphy and Simon Monjack both randomly died of pneumonia, living under the same roof within the same year. It's so unlikely. In any event, I was a big fan of Brittany Murphy, and I hope that I did her justice today in this case. She was a beautiful person. She really was. And it was an honor kind of getting to know her a little bit in this research and hopefully, having her star shine brightly here on this platform. I would like to leave everybody off on a palate cleanser, just something for everybody to chew on where you feel happy when you leave here and then come back and get dirty with me again in our next true crime case, which, by the way, the one that we're airing next week is gruesome. So, brace for impact on that, but a palate cleanser. And it's always going to have to do with Cash, you guys, my dog. Because what could be better than leaving off on a thought of his face? So I posted a photo of Cashy's beak, right? It was, I know. I don't think it's technically called a beak. It's what I've been calling the snout on a dog my entire life. So for me, it's a beak. I posted a picture on Instagram, on the Psychopedia Instagram page. He had like splatter. It looked like blood spatter, but it was marinara sauce on his white beak. Turns out he snatched a meatball straight off my son's plate, slinked out of the room like a seasoned thief, and then tried to play innocent. But the thing is, right, he's got white fur on his beak, and his mother's an investigator. So I knew exactly what happened, and I couldn't have been any happier for him that he scored a meatball. He's just such an angelic beast, so when he breaks a rule and the angel wings slip off for 1 second, I almost applaud the audacity. Like, even in rebellion, this dog is absolute perfection. I do sometimes call him Klepto Cash and the Beaked Burglar for obvious reasons, but can we please just rejoice in the thought of a 90-pound pit bull stealing a tiny meatball off of a 9-year-old's plate and thinking he could get away with it? Perfection. If you made it this far, you are the realest of the real. Thank you for being with me, especially on my first official solo episode as a solo host from this day forward. I hope you enjoyed it. I always enjoy doing this. I love what I do. My passion is true crime. My passion is delivering these cases to you guys, interacting with you guys, and knowing that you're on the other side of this with me. So again, if you are the realest of the real. I humbly thank you so much, and I will see you next week. Thanks for listening. Bye.